Want to get the Republican take on this, Doug Collins?
Yeah, look, I think it's going to be an interesting run. I think Joe Biden has a real problem. He's got to go out and try and sell something Americans aren't buying. And I think that's just honest. Even after their great red meat speech that he supposedly had last week at the State of the Union, the poll showed that he got no State of the Union bump from it. In fact, if anything, he lost some popularity. It's interesting to see, though, and I think this is going to be the key. This is not just a 60-year issue. This is actually the first time in over 100 years that you've had a president and a president basically go at it, where you had a presidential record versus a presidential record. And I think that's where Joe Biden is weakest. When you look at the economy, immigration, crime, the world standing, Donald Trump can go toe-to-toe with, here's what I did in 4 years, here's how you've messed it up in 3.5 years. That's going to be the biggest issue.
Yeah, well, look, that...
All right, let's back up here real quick. That's a good point. That's a strong point. Let's go, I want to go right here real quick. Stop it. Go forward. And then we're going to do this one more time. All right there.
And smear President Biden. You knew that would play into the Republicans' narrative that the president is unfit for office.
Congressman, I reject the suggestion that you have just made.
That's disrespectful of senior people with any kind of memory disability.
You decided to go further and make a generalized statement about his memory, didn't you?
Congressman,
play this back again. This Tennessee senator right here. Go back just a little bit right here. Oh, I went too far. Sorry about that.
Congressman, I could have written my report, theoretically, in a way that omitted references to the president's memory.
President Joe Biden's age and mental acuity were at the center of former Special Counsel Robert Hur's testimony yesterday. We carried it all stem to stern live here on Fox. Hur testified to lawmakers about his report on Biden's mishandling of classified documents. Democrats repeatedly argued that the report cleared Biden's name. Hur repeatedly said it did not.
The Hur report represents the complete and total exoneration of President Biden.
You exonerated
a conviction.
I know that the term willful retention has a...
The special counsel exonerates President Biden.
It's not an exoneration, is it?
The word exoneration does not appear anywhere in my report, and that is not my conclusion.
The New York Post cover stressing the point with some wordplay. You heard me. Get it? The editorial board with the headline, Democrats' badgering of Robert Hur, only made President Biden look worse. Peter Ducey with more from the White House now. Peter.
Harris, the new operating theory is that maybe President Biden was holding on to some of these classified materials so that he could later write something that would live up to a multi-million-dollar book advance.
Joe Biden had 8 million reasons to break the rules. Took classified information and shared it with the guy who was writing the book. The oldest motives in the book, pride and money. You agree with that, Mr. Hur? You wrote it in your report.
That language, and it does appear in the report, and we did identify evidence supporting those assessments.
Robert Hur was crystal clear. His decision to not recommend charges against President Biden does not mean President Biden did nothing wrong.
However, I'm going to presume that you would never prosecute someone you thought was outright innocent.
Correct.
In this case, did you reach a conclusion that this man was outright innocent?
That conclusion is not reflected in my report, sir.
So the report does not say innocent, but White House officials do.
It only affirms the innocence of the president. We've actually seen every administration in the last 50 years having accidentally taken classified documents when they leave office, and you can do something about it.
No more big reports or hearings about the documents are expected, so President Biden is trying to get on with his life, campaigning today in battleground Wisconsin. Harris.
Peter Ducey, thank you very much. Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in Focus Now. So we look back at yesterday. What did America learn from all of that? I mean, a lot of it was showboating, particularly by Democrats who thought that they just could not sit with how much was in that report about the president's memory, or lack thereof.
There was no shortage of showboating yesterday, Harris. And
Sure.
as to what America learned from it, I'm not sure they learned very much. I think one thing they learned, or at least confirmed, is that President Biden was not exonerated by the special counsel. To me, that was one of the most striking aspects of what unfolded yesterday, is we saw Democrat after Democrat pushing hard on the special counsel to say that President Biden was innocent, that he had exonerated President Biden, and the special counsel held his ground. I lost track of how many times he had to clarify the word exonerated is not in my report, and that was not my conclusion.
So, real quickly, what's the difference between not charging a man because you say his memory's bad, and even though there were tapes, apparently audio tapes of a ghostwriter that threw out Biden saying that he had this classified information and had shared it, we know, with the ghostwriter? Like, with all of that evidence, still Robert Hur saying, no evidence. What's the difference between that and exoneration?
Right. Well, prosecutors don't exonerate people. What happened here is that Robert Hur declined to bring charges or recommend charges. And really the difference is that it's not a finding that President Biden didn't break the law or that he did nothing wrong. To the contrary, the special counsel, I think, was pretty clear that President Biden did wrongfully take classified documents with him. Instead, what the special counsel said was that despite this evidence that you could use to prove that Biden committed a crime, the special counsel didn't think a prosecution was warranted, probably because he thought he could never obtain a conviction, given that President Biden is older and would come across to a jury as forgetful.
Well, and he said that was precisely the reason that he added that detail about the president's lack of memory. All right, less than 1 hour ago, the judge overseeing the Georgia election interference case against former President Donald Trump dismissed 6 of the charges in the indictment, including 3 against Trump. But it does leave intact many other charges in the indictment, and the judge wrote that prosecutors could seek a new indictment on the charges he dismissed.
You know, to me, this is my opinion. That's like saying, well, Donald Trump, you're not completely off the hook, but you're not as deep into it as what we originally thought. You got so much crawfishing, and you got so much people that are doing what they're doing for the purposes of themselves, to be able to make money after they leave these offices, that it's not even funny. It is not even funny towards how these people are manipulating the system, even to this day, knowing that basically the reason why they're up there is so that later on they can make a big bang buster off of what's been said or done. The fact of the matter is, whenever you go back to Biden versus Trump on the secret documents, as well as basically all the other presidencies, they're all guilty of it. They're all guilty of hanging on to stuff that they shouldn't be hanging on to, because that material is supposed to belong to we the people. Now, I want to go back to this right here real quick, because this is a very, very important subject matter that has really been boiling, that recently has now got on the front burner towards people to discuss it. This is about TikTok. This is about a platform that they're declaring as it being a threat to the national security of the United States, and which may very well be, along with all the other news media and satellite and internet and computerized material that's out there, or engines or transportation vehicles that's out there. And you have to ask yourself a question that even before 9/11, the way I understand it, young Bush refused to get on a cellular phone and talk to whoever that he needed to talk to, that he always used a landline because that was the most secure thing, because they know that whenever you're talking even so much as on a cell phone, that that you can have eavesdroppers, basically people eavesdropping in on your conversation towards trying to figure out just exactly what's being said and why it's being said. We live in such of a open, I'm going to use the category of supercharged or express lane information materials out there, that it's almost next to impossible, unless you do not talk to nobody, do not think, do not basically live in a cave, that would basically be the only way today that you would be able to totally escape. And I don't even know that would be possible, to totally escape from your thoughts and your ideals and your mind towards not escaping to other people, towards them knowing exactly what you're thinking or what you're thinking about doing. We live in an area right now that is unlike any other area that I can think of. Even looking at the historical facts, going all the way back into the Egyptians and the pharaohs, all the way back to the Greeks and the mythology of the Greeks, as far as I know, we have never had a online information data basis the way that we do today ever before. So this is a brand new entity that has come into play. And the thing about banning one particular entity because it's not an American entity, that can actually have a two-part fold meaning. In other words, if all right, let's use Russia for an example. The people over in Russia that are on social media, now you keep in mind some of these countries won't welcome social media. One of them is Saudi Arabia, because they're afraid that it's a breach. They're afraid that they won't be able to fully control the people if they get to having minds of their own. But the people over in Russia basically know how the people in America feel, because now the people in Russia can log in on that express lane in knowing how the American people feel about the war pertaining to their leader over there, pertaining to Biden. Because of that, it has left a smear campaign of his own people over in Russia because of the atrocities that he's committing upon to the people over in Ukraine. If you ban certain engines or entities because they're not America-based owned or America-based run, then you basically are opening up yourself towards them doing the same thing to us. In other words, they'll cut off all tides on the supercharged lane, and people having cheap seats of being able to know what everybody else is thinking or doing, which can actually come back and bite the American people just as quickly as it would have been if they would have just left it alone. It's almost next to impossible today, with so many different medias and so many different entities out there with satellite. You know, back whenever I was growing up, there was basically only 3 entities out there that we had to deal with. That was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And basically after about 10:30, whenever the news would go off, the whole frequency would go off. That's the way it used to be. That's no longer the case, because today, basically the lights never go out. In other words, it's 24/7. So we're definitely dealing with something today that we wasn't dealing with 40, 50, 60 years ago. Whenever it comes to all these exchanges of people being able to tab in or listen in or hone in or eavesdrop on towards people, knowing what other people are doing. Whenever you go to building walls, especially social media walls, you're basically saying, okay, these are the rules that we're playing by, and because of it, this is what we're going to do. Well, that's fine and dandy whenever you do that, but keep in mind that your adversary, your competitor, overseas can also do the same. Now that could run into a massive confusion. You think that it's confusionable now, in which it is in lots of areas, because it can be overwhelming to a great deal of people's minds, pertaining to having to listen to all this stuff and cipher through what's right and what's wrong, what's correct, what incorrect. You think it's complex now. If you was to shut it all down and say, okay, America has to deal with America's entity pertaining to social media, and we're not going to tag on to any other area out there that has their own engines or their own social media platforms, then you're going to run into the concept of, now we don't know what they're thinking. Now we don't know what they're up to. Now we don't know what their next move is, which can actually be more complex than what we're dealing with today. At least today, we are readjusting our assessment towards social media, and we're fine-tuning it to some degree. You know, I think it was like 4 years ago, you could say something about porn, regardless of what kind of porn that you was looking for, and immediately you'd have a whole list of porn views that was not disclosed in any type of way. It would actually be showing the imagery of that particular link. Today, at least they cover it up because of the precious eyes and minds of the undeveloped out there, that the next thing you know, some little child can tap onto it, and at least it's covered up to the degree that that it's a little bit more complex or harder or difficult today in tagging onto that type of material, especially if you are a minor and you shouldn't be looking at it to begin with. I had no idea in what the opposite sex looked like until I was probably about 12, 13, or 14 years old. And the only reason why I'd done that is because I was being sneaky and nosy, and I was nosing around in my in our bedroom with two other older brothers that lived in the same bedroom, slept in the same bedroom. And the next thing you know, I found some Playboy books and some Hustler books that I wasn't aware that they had, that basically floored me in what the opposite sex actually looked like. Up until then, I had no idea. I mean, I had ideals about that women are built differently than men, but as far as me tangibly looking at those subject matters, that was not entertained to me until I was about 13 or 14 years old. Today, we have children that know just about as much about the opposite sex as they do their own at the age of 6, 7, 8 years old. Now, you can't tell me that these undeveloped minds, that won't have a substantial influence upon how they feel and how they approach their own lives in this open exposure that actually come from the Frenchmen's, that basically after the Korean War opened up a whole new venue of things being brought over here to the American people that was not here originally. And then the next thing you know, they had these great big freaking satellites to where if you was into all that stuff, you could log on to Debbie Does Dallas or Deep Throat or whatever and see all the porn that you wanted to see. But once more, it was difficult in being able to do that. You either had to have the money or the experience to be able to log on, to be able to watch those kind of frequencies out there. Today, it's as easy as picking up your phone and saying, hey, I want to see taboo porn, or hey, I want to see bicycle porn, or hey, I want to see gymnastic porn, or pontoon porn, or whatever kind of porn. All you got to do is tell Google, and it immediately will give those insights. At least they have covered up those insights to where now it's not as obvious, but it's still an uncontrollable entity out there that children can get a hold of, that I think can be very, very influential in undeveloped minds and hearts.
You're playing one of the world's best, yeah. We said it was March Madness, and then
yeah, here we go.
Fresh example right there, kicking off.
Everything's coming up at Rosa. So the TikTok vote passed.
Yes.
We also have
passed Overwhelmingly so.
Yes, and in Georgia, 6 counts quashed against Trump and others in that case. So Harris will take you through with more. Here she is.
Now, this is the subject matter that I was talking about that they're fixing to discuss right now on public domain.
We begin with breaking news. The TikTok bill has passed the U.S. House of Representatives, and it gives the app's owner a big choice: sell or be banned in America. Young people have flooded lawmakers' offices and phones, begging them not to do this. Don't ban TikTok, they say. 170 million Americans are on the platform, and now it goes to the U.S. Senate. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. The bill gives TikTok's communist China-linked owner a choice: divest or TikTok will be banned in the U.S. American buyers are already circling. But the price tag could reportedly hover around hundreds of billions of dollars.
Now, this prime time that they're talking about, this supercharged open line that's got 170 million viewers, that's a big platform. Anybody that holds that many viewers. And to think that you're going to be able to just walk up and jerk the biscuit out of people's mouths after them becoming adapted or after them tasting the taste of that particular platform, you're going to have consequences with people that's going to rear up about it. You're going to have consequences of people that's going to rear up about it that may be more than just words. I hope that it ain't, but it could be. But the fact of the matter is, what I was talking about towards dismantling the supercharging super lanes coming from other countries, you're setting yourself up for them doing the same. And you keep in mind, if everybody now has all these barriers around them to where nobody knows what each other's thinking or what each other's thinking about doing, or etc., that can actually have a twofold meaning in becoming even more complex, because now we don't know what they're thinking. They don't know what we're thinking. We have closed minds, closed identities, closed this, closed that, which is fine. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. But there could be a whiplash to what they're going to be doing in the dawn of this. And, I was the one that prayed for social media, because I knew that the only way that I was going to be influential out in the eyes of the people, in which I'm not trying to do this for any type of self-glory. The only reason why that I'm doing this is for the glory of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And I wish, in a way, that I didn't have to become victimized. I'm going to use that word, victimized, to this type of entity. But I knew that if I was going to be what God intended for me to be, I was going to have to dibble dabble around. I was going to have to pull my pants legs up, and I was going to have to walk off into the water and get a little wet. Has it been difficult? Yes. Has it left me vulnerable? Yes. But it has not stopped me from me being able to preach, teach, and tell people about the righteousness and the glory of God. I realize that a lot of people are superstitious over here, and a lot of people rather not get online. They rather stay off the grid, in which that's fine too. But the fact of the matter is, whenever you go to putting up stipulations like this with other countries, and trust me, I don't get on TikTok. The only time that I use TikTok is whenever I find a link out there that's already adjusted to TikTok. Then I really don't have no other choice to transfer it over to my viewers other than to transfer it over using their engines, their transportation devices. So I really don't have no choice in doing that. But as far as me being linked in with TikTok, because of the controversy, because of national security interest and etc., I have stayed off of TikTok. Now, does that mean that I'm going to remain and stay off of TikTok for the rest of my life? I don't know. As of right now, that's the choice that I've made towards not participating in a TikTok account. I could, but as of right now, I don't know that I will or that I ever will. But the fact of the matter is, once you go out into public domain, and that's exactly what this is. This is public domain. This is a supercharged express lane, is what this is. Once you go out there, you got to realize that you're not going to have everybody supporting you, and you're going to have just as many people that dislike you as you are people that like you. In other words, if you can't take criticism very well, you shouldn't get on the express lane. Because I promise you, whenever you get out there, you're going to have trillions of people that's going to have different opinions and different ideals other than what you got. I felt like that it was just that basically the means justified the ends towards me being able to get on these social media platforms and basically telling my side of the story in why that I ever went out west to investigate what went on in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, connected with what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. One day, does that mean that I'm not going to expand or use my testimony in being able to broaden my horizons towards either making a book and putting it out there to the general public, or maybe even a movie? No, that don't mean that. What it does mean is that you need to be very, very social conscientious about what you say and how you say it, because things can be taken out of context. And if you think that you can document yourself by saying something or recording something that you are doing, regardless whether it's hardcore porn, sex, or whatever, and then all of a sudden you decide, oh, I'm going to take this off, I never should have put that on there, you're only deceiving yourself if you think that once it gets out there that it will never come back and haunt you, because it can. I promise you it can, because once that stuff gets released out into the digital world, in the satellite world, it can bounce from satellite to satellite to satellite, and though you may disconnect it from this satellite for a while, it can always come back to that satellite again towards what you said or what you done or what your intent was. So you have to be very, very careful, because you keep in mind, whatever you put out there, it's going to be scrutinized. And odds are it's probably going to be criticized. Scrutinized and criticized. So you have to be very, very cautious, and this is the reason why that it is not an express lane that children should have full access to. There's no doubt that children should have a little bit of access to it because it does have benefits, but they shouldn't have full access to the express lane, because the express lane has so many entities in it that can either enhance a person's life or destroy a person's life. Now, this is my opinion about this, and you can take it for what it's worth. But TikTok, to me, this is my opinion, is not any more crucially dangerous against our well-being and the American people's lives over here, no more than any other controlled entity out there pertaining to the express lane. This is brand new. This is a brand new pioneering event that has recently come on board, that I'm glad that God gave me the ability to be able to use this, to be able to get my message out there. And what inspired me back right around Y2K was whenever we did have a computer and I did have problems in spelling and putting out stuff that I wanted to put out, I knew that the only way that I was going to be able to do that was to be able to use the Dragon. At the time, it was called the Dragon, to where you could speak and spell and talk into the computer, and it would basically take all your information and dialogue it and put it on English form pertaining to spelling. That's basically what they've done with all these social media platforms, to the degree that now you have an encyclopedia and and a dictionary, not just in American standards, but now you can go to English, you can go to Japanese, you can go to Chinese, you can go to Russia, you can go to all these other different institutions all over the world and get their opinion about the same word. This is also a prophecy. Listen to me carefully. This is also a prophecy that it talks about in the latter part of Daniel, that knowledge will be expanded. That without this prophecy coming true, the knowledge of that prophecy would have never come true. Because this has now been entertained into the eyes of the public domain, now people all over the world has the ability to tag on to it, log on to it, talk on to it, listen to it, analyze it, dissect it, scrutinize it, whatever that they want to do, is all part of that prophecy coming out of the latter part of Daniel in the King James Version Bible towards knowledge expanding. Now, to some people, especially your young, undeveloped minds, it's overwhelming to them. And they really don't know how to deal with this, especially if they haven't been properly trained and tutored in how to use this super lane. Because I guarantee you, it's just like whatever that thing is over there in Europe where you can drive 200 miles an hour and nobody gets a ticket for. There are benefits to it, but there's also big disbenefits to it, and that's the reason why children should not have full access to the express lane.
TikTok rolled out an aggressive campaign in the lead up to this morning's votes. It used urging young users in particular to call their congresspeople, flooding those phone lines. A show of just how powerful TikTok can be. House progressives took to the Hill yesterday in protest of the legislation. They brought up upset content creators who depend on the app for their careers and more.
So many people, not only 5 million small businesses rely on it, but 170 million people rely on this app for more than just their livelihood. They rely on this app for their mental health. They've connected with people. They've made lifelong connections that wouldn't have been possible elsewhere because of TikTok. Period.
The bottom line is that user data will go to one of our top adversaries, an enemy in China. All the information that you load up in your TikTok account, all of your connections, all of that data goes to China. Fox has asked people about how they feel that their information is going to those hands. The consensus? No big deal.
And I feel like TikTok is a good platform for many reasons. So I think the conversation should shift more towards like data protection, data privacy, versus completely like getting rid of an entire platform.
I don't know how much valuable information they're going to get from it.
I don't know how much of a security threat that is, just because I feel like the majority of TikTok users are going to be like of my demographic, just going on and having like fun.
However, former Vice President Mike Pence had a sobering comparison. He said, quote, TikTok is digital fentanyl and Congress, Biden must act before it's too late, end of quote. In focus, the chair of the House Select Committee on China, Congressman Mike Gallagher. First, let's go to our senior congressional correspondent, Chad Pergram. Busy morning on the Hill, Chad.
And what Mr. Pence said, the vice president of Donald Trump's administration, is in fact correct. It's like fentanyl express on digital express lane. And it is. Because once you get out there, you're going to be analyzed. You're going to be scrutinized. You have to be very careful in what you say and your intent in saying it, because it can be manipulated, especially today with so many smart people out there pertaining to this digital world that we're now living in, that we wasn't living in 25, 30 years ago. Not on this level. It was out there, but not on this level. Towards being able to take somebody's face, somebody's voice, and put two together and make it actually give the imagery of something that it is not. That's what they're discussing right now pertaining to royalists over there in England right now of a picture that was taken that has been manipulated in the fact that it is not a genuine picture of her. People can take things now and they can make it look real towards a horse flying in the middle of the clouds. Well, we know that that's impossible. But if you're dealing with a young, undeveloped mind, you could actually convince them that there's horses that can fly in clouds. Because now they have engineered it and made it look so real. And we used to call this TV enhancement or automated TV shows that usually people like Disney or Hollywood, I mean, you had to be very, very clever to be able to do something like that. And now it's exposed to any and everybody being able to do that. So is the dangers out there? Oh, yes. They're out there in bushel baskets. That's the reason why all of them should have guardrails. All of them should be coordinated and organized appropriately to the eyes of the public. Not just the American public, not just Chinese public, not just Russia public, not just India public, but all public. All public.
Harris, good morning. Congress targeted TikTok, the House voting to curb access to TikTok in the U.S. unless it separates itself from the Chinese government. Bipartisan lawmakers say the bill scoops up data. There was an organized lobbying campaign against the bill.
They use geolocation data targeting minor children to then force them to call congressional offices in order to continue using the app. And in doing so, these children called and they asked the question, what is Congress and what is a congressman?
The vote was 352 to 65. The bill needed a 2/3 vote to pass. The threshold on this bill, 285. So the vote was well above that. Texas Democrat Jasmine Crockett voted present. There was an odd coalition of bipartisan lawmakers who opposed the bill.
We don't need to be protected by the government from information. Some of us just don't want the president picking which apps we can put on our phones or which websites that we can visit. We don't think that's appropriate. We also think it's dangerous to give the president that kind of power.
The Pew Research Center says 56% of all adults between the ages of 18 and 34 use the platform. Many young people get their news from TikTok. That's why members were mindful of what their constituents think about TikTok.
I don't use TikTok. I think it's ill-advised to do so. Members of this body are famous on TikTok, and I think that's unwise. But I respect the choices of 170 million users in the United States. The president can do all sorts of things with respect to commerce, but cannot ban the free flow of information across international boundaries.
Opponents of the bill wondered who would buy TikTok if it breaks away from China. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will not commit to putting this bill on the floor. He wants to talk with his committee chairs first. Harris?
Yeah, we have the list of people. I mean, they're putting up billions of dollars, hundreds of billions to buy TikTok. American buyers potentially could have it their way. We'll see. Chad, thank you. Let's get a little bit more of the debate that was happening just before the vote today on the House floor.
TikTok is a threat to our national security because it is owned by ByteDance, which does the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party. This bill therefore forces TikTok to break up with the Chinese Communist Party. This is a common sense measure to protect our national security.
Obviously, that's Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, and Free Press calls him, quote, the man leading the charge against TikTok. Well, he is the chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and the congressman, joins me now. That piece begins with this question. Should a company under the control of the Chinese Communist Party be allowed to own the primary source of news for young Americans? It's a great question. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
And what's your take on it? Should they be?
No, absolutely not. For example, we don't let them own TV stations or newspapers. What this bill does is take a very narrow focus. We are concerned with foreign adversary control of social media platforms, foreign adversaries as defined by existing statute, congressional definition, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. And that is the primary problem. When TikTok has become the news platform for young Americans, we have to question whether it is wise to have our foremost adversary dictate what news and information young Americans get. The potential for propaganda abuse is simply too great. That's why we took this common sense bipartisan step today. We had 352 members of the House of Representatives vote in favor of this measure. In the current Congress, it is very rare to get that level of agreement on
That's
anything.
Yeah, I mean, you had a 60% threshold for this, correct? Because it was fast-tracked. And by the way, why was that done?
In light of time before we had to leave this week, as well as concerns over the Rules Committee, and because it came out of committee last week, 50-0, there was a sense that we could go directly to the floor, and we had already gotten the unanimous endorsement of the Committee of Jurisdiction.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable how many people were on board with this. Now it goes to the Senate. We'll see what happens there. You know, this is also, I think, kind of stands out. TikTok has been the fork in the road, if you will, for President Biden's political concerns and his national security concerns. A New York Times headline: Biden, the president, wants to curb TikTok. Biden, the candidate, embraces its stars. Biden claims he backs the crackdown on TikTok, but his campaign is actually using TikTok, posting videos going after former President Trump's policies, taking victory laps on their own, and even sharing the president's Super Bowl pick. And the night of President Biden's State of the Union address, he invited dozens of social media influencers, many of them TikTok stars, to the White House for a watch party. I mean, can he have it both ways?
Well, the way in which all Americans can continue to enjoy TikTok and post political commentary, post silly dance videos, or whatever the heck they want to post, is if ByteDance agrees to sell TikTok to a non-adversary entity. And that way, use of the platform doesn't have to be impeded. Now, I would still argue, as a parent, that social media use in general is not healthy, but that is a separate question as to whether a foreign adversary should control access to, should control a news platform or a social media platform. So I would hope that the Biden campaign gets off TikTok. I doubt that they will, but I'm glad the president has signaled that he's willing to sign this bill, which would solve the problem for everybody.
Yeah, and he's courting them in the meantime. And look, companies would love to have this one because it's got 170 million users already. And here's a list of some who've expressed some interest to buy ByteDance, that communist China-owned company. Rumble, Microsoft, Oracle, Walmart, Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame. He's also the chairman of O'Leary Ventures and Beanstocks. So if this changes hands, what changes about TikTok? Because that's the big question right now for people who use the platform.
I think we finally have transparency around the algorithm. And that was really where previous efforts to mitigate the threat posed by TikTok fell short. Project Texas, which was this partnership with Oracle, even proponents of Project Texas were forced to admit that ultimately control of the algorithm went back to ByteDance and Beijing. And without some more transparency around that, you can never mitigate against the threat of propaganda on the platform. And for the
whenever it goes to empowering various countries with various platforms like this, as I said a while ago, it can have a backfiring effect in basically their country banning United States entities from their mainstream, from their super lanes, that, like I said, can have a backfiring effect in people's lives whenever it comes to communications. This is all based around communications. Communications, who started communications basically years and years ago, as far as I know, it probably goes back further than this, pertaining to the Native American people whenever they would communicate with another tribe, and that tribe may be 20, 30 miles away, but they could build a certain fire and use different images of the smoke going up that would indicate to the other people that an enemy was coming, or that everything was all right, or that we needed this or we needed that. This is all based around communications, okay? And to open up a super lane like this, basically you're empowering any and everything to be able to go online that could be an instant success, depending upon who it is and what the subject matter is. So, in a way, this is our First Amendment right being exploited, not just in America, but all over the world, that can have benefits as well as consequences. And this is where the American people and the American legislation people has to be able to make a decision: is does the risk outweigh the benefits, or does the benefits outweigh the risk? Once more, I believe all should have regulations and safeguards pertaining to guardrails, that only certain people should be able to use certain junctures of that particular entity. AI empowers technology and describes in having intelligence that can be used either as an asset or it can be weaponized. This is where I think the AI manufacturers, pertaining to their original designers, did not put into proper play whenever they put this social platform out there, or platforms out there, that now we're having to deal with on levels that 20 years ago, 20, 25, 30 years ago, we never would have thought that we would have been dealing with this type of stuff this way. But we are. And the reason why we are is because of social media algorithms has basically fundamentally changed users' expressions on social media platforms. It's very, very complex in one way, but very, very easy to understand in another. That if it is put into the wrong hands, it can be used for the wrong purposes. In other words, it can be weaponized.
If you think that threat simply doesn't exist, I would point to what happened last week when TikTok forced a pop-up on all of its users asking for their zip code information and then calling members of Congress. We had kids calling members of Congress threatening to commit suicide if we took action on the bill. Imagine if we were...
Let's listen to that again.
Calling members of Congress threatening to commit suicide if... Members of Congress. We had kids calling members of Congress threatening to commit suicide if we...
See, you can...
Information and then calling members of Congress. We had...
You can use it in a devious blackmailing type way towards saying, hey, the only way that we're not going to accept this, and if we do, we're just going to go to killing ourselves. It's going to be a wide, massive suicide spree all over the country because of what Congress is debating on doing. You got to keep in mind, play it with a grain of salt if you would, but at the same time, there's always that possibility that somebody out there could be very, very serious. But you keep in mind, we have these back screen warriors. They're basically saying things and doing things that they really don't feel like that they're ever going to have to give a full accountability for. So they can basically be gun-ho in their warrior techniques in trying to personalize their statements. But the fact of the matter is, some of these children that make those statements are probably very, very sincere, and even some of them may actually go forth in trying to do something like this. That's the dangers in social media, to be understood in how AI can influence the user's experiences and in a driven media form. In a driven media form, that the outcomes can be just as horribly one way as they are in another. And I think that's the part that the AI founders and those that put this material out there to the public did not fully put under consideration in their investigations, and just exactly how AI could function and how AI could embody people's thinkings and basically their actions.
Calling members of Congress threatening for their zip code information and then calling members of Congress. We had kids calling members of Congress threatening to commit suicide if we took action on the bill. Imagine if we were debating something even more important, like an authorization for war or removing permanent normal trade relation status with China. TikTok proved how the platform could be weaponized. And so I think if we had a divestment, we would be able to mitigate against that threat.
Customizing and being in control of these features is, to me, essential. But to take it completely offline, to me, you're setting yourself up for a backfiring event that could actually hurt you more than it would have been if you'd have just dealt with it appropriately. Now, that's my opinion about it pertaining to these examples, personalizing the content on online sites enhancement users. And you can take it for what it is, but the fact of the matter is it has become a hot topic for people to talk about because of, listen to me, because of the negligence from these designers or from these founders that had put this out there to not just the American people, but to everybody's lives. It's very powerful, psychologically, emotionally, mentally. It's very, very powerful whenever it comes to supporting various nations in their attempts towards what they're doing, customizing their ideals, and basically putting it out there on a supercharged entity that can be just as devastating on a highly intelligent frequency as it is enhancing. Those are the things that the founders did not put in realization whenever it comes to AI independence.
I mentioned previously the usage of, from former President Mike Pence, the usage of comparing this to fentanyl. And that's coming from China too. So the company that owns TikTok is based in China. It's sharing information about all of us. If it divests or sells, it can keep TikTok. So now the pressure is on. What does that pressure look like from American citizens on you? Because they're calling lawmakers.
Well, certainly TikTok has embarked on what I think is really a historic lobbying campaign against this bill, or really any effort. I mean, throwing millions and millions of dollars at the problem, hiring former members of Congress to lobby on behalf of ByteDance. By the way, I don't think that should be legal. I think that's an abuse of your former office, but they're throwing a lot of money designed to weaponize the DC swamp against us, as well as just not being honest about what the bill actually does. That pop-up I mentioned said that we were pursuing an outright ban. Of course that's not the case. That is an outright lie. What we are trying to effectuate is a divestiture, a change in ownership, and then again, people can continue to use TikTok for their small business, for their dance videos, for whatever they want to use it for. We're concerned about Chinese Communist Party control of the dominant news platform in America.
Congressman Mike Gallagher, thank you so very much. Appreciate you making the time today. A big day on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have this Fox News alert. So this has been cooking alongside the conversation I was just having with the congressman. Hunter Biden has just declined to attend a public congressional hearing next Wednesday on influence peddling. Remember that whole stunt he pulled? He was so desperate for the public to hear from him directly. He wanted a public hearing. He didn't want to go behind closed doors with lawmakers. He didn't want to do any of that. He wanted it all. And of course, we have the reports that he's making a documentary. Some of those cameras were there the day he pulled the stunt when he showed up to a congressional hearing on his fighting a subpoena. And now he says, no, I don't want a public hearing. It's part of House Republicans' impeachment inquiry into his father, President Biden. Abby Lowell, an attorney for Hunter Biden, told House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer that neither he nor his client can attend because of a scheduling conflict with one of Hunter's ongoing criminal cases. Hunter and his attorneys have repeatedly, as I just mentioned, been asking for that public hearing after initially defying a subpoena for a closed-door deposition with GOP investigators. He ultimately complied and sat for that private interview on February 28th. So are they going to reschedule? No, he says he declines to attend the hearing. What happens next? And I guess I'll have a gap in that documentary footage. A massive ban on puberty blockers for children is happening in England. England's National Health Service is stressing there could be safety concerns with the treatment and will no longer offer them. Plus, former special counsel Robert Hur repeatedly shut down Democrats yesterday who were claiming he had exonerated President Biden. He hadn't.
At points, the Democrats seemed almost to border on the delusional. The fact is that Hur tried over and over again to distinguish between his finding and the statement of Democrats that the president was cleared.
Hur also defended his report's emphasis on Biden's age and mental fitness. Peter Ducey and legal expert Tom Dupree in Focus Next.
Years old, he went out for a ride in a Yak 52, and from that moment on, he was just completely infatuated with the idea of being a military pilot. He was present as a Marine and present as a dad, as a husband. He said, I want to be the best, I want to give my best, and that's what was important to him. It was a normal, ordinary Wednesday for us. When I was picking up my daughter from daycare, my friend that I would carpool with mentioned that there was an aircraft that went down. My friend said, I could drive you to the squadron. And I told her, I need you to take me home because if they're going to come tell me, they're coming to my door. In an instant, your life does change. And you, especially having children, have to decide, how am I going to do this? I got a message from a friend, and they said, there's this foundation called Tunnel to Towers. And
yep, that's a good foundation.
Timing, just days away from what we noted, an election where Putin is all but guaranteed to secure another 6-year term, and continued delay in the...
Now, do you read that down at the bottom? This is the crazy. This is the insanity state of mind that we're dealing with right now. Not just with the American people, but the world in general. Putin again threatens to use nuclear weapons if necessary. The atom bomb was created to stop a war, not to end civilization as we know it. You put the wrong items in the wrong hands and the wrong people, and this is what you get. You get a threat to humanity on levels unimaginable. Unimaginable. Because if Russia alone was to release all their nuclear heads at one time, it could be devastating. It could be devastating to humanity regardless of what continent that one lived on. This is what we're dealing with. And for anybody to even remotely even suggest that they was going to do something like this is a threat to humanity, pertaining to humanity violations. So we're dealing with madness. We're dealing with total madness whenever it comes to people that's in charge of these big bombs. This is the primary reason why that I stood with the people in Santa Fe, New Mexico, while they was protesting against the anti-nuclear movement pertaining to Los Alamos, New Mexico. This is the reason why that I stood with them then. This is the reason why I stand with them today, in conjunction that these bombs never should had been created, because they was created for basically the destruction of mankind. They wasn't created to make electricity. They wasn't created for medical purposes. They was created to destroy life on massive levels unimaginable. And for anybody to even remotely even say that they would do this should not be taken lightly, my friends. Should not on any level be taken lightly. And I'm pretty sure the nuclear agency world out there listens to every word coming from a deranged maniac, basically, and a deranged maniac's government over there that would even remotely suggest doing something like this.
And continued delay in an urgently needed $60 billion funding package for Ukraine from the U.S. Joining me now is CNN's military analyst, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He's formerly the commanding general of the U.S. Army, Europe, and 7th Army. General, always good to see you. First, let me get you to respond to these threats. Once again, nuclear threats from Vladimir Putin coming just days before he's expected to lock in another 6-year term. There had been reports that the U.S. was quite concerned a couple of years ago in terms of Russia potentially using tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Not to say there's no attention to these new threats, but how worrisome do you view them?
Very.
It's always a consideration, Diana. You know, it's fascinating that the Russian military has just under 6,000 nuclear weapons. That's, as Fred just said, the air, the sea, and the land base. That's much more than the United States has by themselves, but when you consider the United States, France, and the UK, all nuclear nations, it's about the same. There's about parity. Russia tends to have more of the tactical nukes, and when you say that, that's a tough thing to talk about because those are low-yield nuclear weapons, but they're still devastatingly effective and efficient on the battlefield and beyond. Russia has had some experience with nuclear accidents like Chernobyl. So they know a little bit more about radiation poisoning, and they should be a little bit hesitant to use these kinds of threats because they know the challenges associated with them. But what I'd say is, having exercised and conduct training events with Russian military, they always tend to end their exercises with a nuclear blast. That usually is what they call index when something like that happens. So they are not loath to put that at the forefront. And Mr. Putin has repeatedly used the bluster on nuclear weapons. And you can't ignore that because they are such dangerous weapons and he has so many of them.
Yeah, you do have to take it seriously. In the state television interview that he gave, he also noted that there would be severe consequences if there were Western boots on the ground in Ukraine involved in this fighting, and described any additional Western supplies and military assistance, weapons, as fruitless. Listen to what he said.
If it formally comes to military contingents of foreign states being deployed in Ukraine, I am confident this would not change the situation on the battlefield. This is the most important thing. Likewise, the delivery of Western weaponry to Ukraine failed to change anything. Another point, this may lead to serious geopolitical consequences.
Okay, the former argument aside, because I don't think anyone is seriously considering sending troops into Ukraine right now, but in terms of weapons delivery, I think he's projecting there. Am I wrong? Because from everything we've heard from experts, it would be a significant change in terms of trajectory on the battlefield for Ukrainians if they did get additional aid, if they did get the $60 billion supplemental that the U.S. is still stalling on passing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Diana. He is projecting and he's bluffing. And he knows how devastatingly effective Western aid has been for Ukraine. For a country like Ukraine, a relatively small country, to stand up over 2 years against a Russian offensive has been phenomenal, first of all. And part of the rationale behind that is because Ukraine has been given weapons. And he is, in fact, sending a signal not only to his domestic audience, but I think to foreign audiences, to include some in the United States, saying, hey, don't send any more weapons because it doesn't make a difference. Well, the fact of the matter is, from a military perspective, those weapons have made a difference. And the absence of those weapons are creating disaster right now in Ukraine. So, again, I would personally say to the U.S. Congress, especially the GOPs, put the bill on the floor. Let's continue that flow of weapons to the Ukrainian military so they can continue to defeat Russia's army. And that's what they've been doing. They have been defeating them, make no doubt about it.
Yeah, and
The David and Goliath has been proven through the support of the superpowers that the Goliath isn't near as strong or as big as what it thought that it was going to be. And the truth of the matter is, the Russian government, Putin, has already made fools of themselves by making some sort of a declaration there towards the beginning and saying that they would have it knocked out in less than a week, basically. And their week has now turned into 2 years. So if that don't speak volumes about their inaccuracy, and there's speculations of what they thought that they was going to be able to achieve, it does. They probably thought, I can't say this for sure, this is just my opinion, that after they seen what happened to the American government pertaining to the Afghanistan deal, whenever we stayed over there for 20 years and spent something like $2.5–3 trillion, not counting all the human casualties, towards training all them people and giving them access to be able to defeat the Taliban. And then 11 days later, the Taliban takes back over the country because they lay down to the Taliban without any type of resistances. They probably took that as a signal that if they're not willing to fight for their own freedom, then neither nor will the Ukrainians. Especially if we make things tough enough on them and hard enough on them, they'll retreat, give up, throw up their hands, and become to their beck and call. Well, the Ukrainians have proved otherwise, and I look up to them because of that. I really do. I look up to them, and the fact of the matter is the American government has obligated itself to Ukraine after 2014, 2015, after that event, that the skirmish happened. And if we retaliate now, today, without being a full supporter towards being a loyal backer of the Ukrainians, then that's going to degrade our imagery with all our other allies that truly thinks that the American people has their backs. That's going to degrade the confidence from all our other allies that could actually start pursuing and looking in other terms. So looking at this from a long-term perspective, you daggum right. This can be consequential to the democracy world, not just the free world over here in America, but the democracy free world all over the globe. And we know this. And our seniors know this. And our generals and those in the White House knows this. So for them to be playing with this to me, they're playing with poison. They're playing with something that could very well backfire in their faces as well. That's the reason why I said what I said whenever it first broke out. That's whenever President Biden should have restrained the situation based upon the ideology that if you give somebody an inch, 9 times out of 10, they will take a mile. And that's exactly what that they have done. It's sad. It's horrendously sad that people to this day are still just as evilly minded and poisonous as what Ronald Reagan stood on the national platform and said to the Russian old USSR government.
And the U.S. has just announced it'll be sending $300 million worth of weapons, including air defense interceptors, artillery rounds, and armor systems, as well as older versions of ATACMS. But General, this, as you know, is at best a stopgap measure. How much time would this buy the Ukrainians?
6 months.
Well, it keeps the logistics chain flowing, Deanna, and that's the most important thing on a battlefield. So you can continue to have those resupplies. It's been now 4 months of a delay that's broken the Ukrainian supply lines. Just this smattering, this 300 million, and truthfully, I hear a lot of pundits say that's not much. It's a drop in the bucket. It's small. It's certainly smaller than what we have been giving them. But what I would suggest is that's a significant amount of ammunition, and it is mostly artillery pieces and long-range rockets and air defense equipment, which Ukraine needs to survive, and they've got to keep that supply chain pumped. And this is a stopgap method, to be sure, but it's also a bridge to hopefully that $60 billion package that hopefully will come soon.
Yeah, because at this rate, Russia is outproducing artillery shells more than the U.S. and Europe combined. Just gives you an idea.
Sure they are, and it's basically boosted their economy over there because now you got people that's working for the military in building more bombs and more tanks and more airplanes. But at the same time, the people need to realize that they're no longer building luxury items, they're building death destruction items. So the things that they was fond of, air conditioning, automobiles, nice homes, nice clothes, nice this, are going to be jeopardized. And you know why they're going to be jeopardized? Because of their leadership over in Russia. So by anybody telling you that there's benefits in war, they're full of it. There is not benefits in war. There does come a time whenever people such as Israel has to stand up with a backbone in saying enough is enough, and we're no longer going to tolerate this type of activity being done to our own sovereign citizens. What they do with that movement that is now fully expanded over with Hamas and the rest of those enemies over there is going to be up to them. It ain't for me to tell them whether or not they should or shouldn't stop, whether or not they should bring in more aid. I think that they should bring in more aid to the innocent lives, humanitarian aid. But what they do, I can't tell them what to do. I can't tell them what they shouldn't do or should do, because they are an entity of their own, and they have just as much right to run their affairs and defend their people as we do, or the Ukrainians do, or any other group of people does. My concern is that once this entity gets released in a negative way, it starts snowballing, especially with people like Putin mentioning nuclear war. And what's the end game to all this? Is it going to be the complete total destruction of humanity? Is that what their intentions is? Start out small and then end up big? Could very well be. This is the reason why the American people and the world needs to have a strong backbone pertaining to President Putin and their evil, overbearing government that Ronald Reagan was talking about 30 plus years ago, that helped to bring down the Berlin Wall and helped to bankrupt Russia.
Of the urgency that's needed right now to get additional artillery ammunition and other weapons to Ukrainian soldiers. Lieutenant General Mark Hartling, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Brianna. Thank you.
I don't support war, but what I do support is people defending themselves from being run over, used and abused and taken advantage of. And if that's what it takes to prove their point in good people using bad tactics to defend themselves, well, then so be it. That's where we are. But I still say that we would not be where we are today if the church world, the so-called church world, and the political world over here in America would have stood with the Windmill Ministries missions that began 30 plus years ago in the year 1989, shortly after the Reagan administration was fulfilling itself. So in actuality, it is the Western world's fault. It is the church or the so-called church community's fault that they have allowed for this to fester and now grow proportionally out of hand. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless where we go from this moment on in coming up affairs pertaining to the benefit of all humanity. Not just the benefit of America's humanity, but the benefit to all humanity, because the bottom line is this: all lives matter. I may not be able to comprehend a word that they may say because they're speaking in some other different dialect, but they have just as much love and just as much contentment towards the people that who they are and what they deal with on a day-to-day level pertaining to their ancestry as we do, or the people in Russia do, or the people in China do. This is all being blown out of proportion, and if we don't watch, people like poisonous Putin is going to wind up bringing that much more destruction into the lives of innocent people. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us as we go forward. God bless and shalom.